I couldn't tell you what that guy's problem is, but hey, it's the capital Wasteland. Anything can happen. But look, I want to show you something. If you took all the reviews from Fallout 1 to 76 and lined them up side by side, you'd get this neat little chart. Now, this data can tell a lot of different stories about the franchise, but one thing is pretty clear. As the series grew mainstream, the number of views absolutely exploded, which isn't surprising given how big of a household name Fallout has become.
The Game Award goes to Fallout.
But when I focus on just Fallout 3 New Vegas, something really strange stands out. New Vegas has almost 6 times the amount of reviews, over 100,000 review difference between 3. I know reviews are only left by a fraction of the people who played and enjoyed them, but a difference like that? That's not a coincidence, that's a statement. Because despite the two games virtually looking the same and playing the same, they distinctly don't feel the same. I think a good example of this is how in 3, the world reacts around you, whereas New Vegas, the world reacts to you. If you haven't played both games, that might sound really odd, but take NPCs for example. In 3, far more NPCs actually talk to each other.
I told you, Gob, it ain't the radio. The Enclave station comes in fine.
I know that sounds dumb at first, but really think about it. Almost everywhere in 3, you can find NPCs talking amongst themselves, giving the illusion that these are real people with their own digital lives.
Sorry to keep you waiting. What seems to be the trouble today?
I've got this headache that just won't go away, even with the pills you gave me last week. It's the lights, I think. They hurt my eyes.
Once you notice it, you'll realize it's everywhere in this game, making it feel like a cohesive world that will move along regardless if you're there or not.
Don't give me that look or I'll slap it right off your face. Yes, Mom.
Now, in New Vegas, these type of interactions are pretty rare outside of a few scripted events. A couple that come to mind are Trudy and Joe Cobb arguing,
"What the hell is your problem?"
Big Sal and Nero dealing with Chino, and even that one NCR lady that lets you commit a war crime.
You weren't supposed to kill him. Fuck.
It's pretty common to hear people talk about each other, but you'll hardly see them interacting with one another. I think the funniest example of this is Mick and Ralph from the Mick and Ralph shop in Freeside. These guys live and own an entire shop together, and I don't think I've ever seen them interact with one another. They refer to each other in dialogue, sure, but besides that, they just awkwardly stand away from each other across the room. I even stood here 10 minutes straight hoping they would eventually say something to each other, but they never did. However, they do sleep together, so who's Mickin' and who's Ralphin'? Now, while the NPCs of New Vegas might not interact with each other as much as 3, they make up for it by interacting directly with the player and doing that on a far deeper level. Almost every NPC you talk to is a treasure trove of world building, with all the one-on-one conversations actually revealing a lot about the people, the world around them, and how they feel about it.
We went to a fucking restaurant. They charge you $2.50 for a soda. On the way out, you should blow that place up.
Really?
Oh, shit.
Even characters who might seem irrelevant, like Sunny Smiles, an NPC mainly there to guide you through a tutorial, are surprisingly nuanced.
Call themselves Caesar's Legion. Never seen them in these parts, so I couldn't tell you much. Supposedly, they keep slaves and they got some real nasty ways of killing folks. But maybe that's just something folks in the NCR cooked up to make themselves seem more useful here. Less uninvited.
With only a few lines of dialogue, Sunny implicitly tells the player that independent communities like Goodsprings have no idea how big of a threat Caesar's Legion actually is. Because, well, they didn't see Nipton get burned to the ground firsthand. For all they know, they think it's just NCR propaganda, which is not only clever and realistic, but deeply humanizing. It shows that the residents of Goodsprings have a sense of skepticism about the world they live in, which I think I would too if some random troops showed up out of nowhere claiming they're the good guys. It adds a layer of immersion that makes the world feel alive, albeit in a different kind of way from 3. This is what I mean when I say despite the two games looking the same, they clearly don't feel the same. This doesn't mean either one is better or worse. That's for you to decide, not some YouTuber spoon-feeding you an opinion. But it perfectly shows how you can give two developers the same exact tools, but what they create out of it can be so different. And that right there is exactly what I want to examine today. I think there are some great things about Fallout 3 that doesn't get enough credit, which might sound weird coming from me of all people, as New Vegas's gold for gold #1 meat writing champion, but while I might poke fun at the writing, dialogue, and creative decisions within 3 sometimes, it's genuinely impressive that this game was made and released. Yeah, it's a little rough around the edges, but I think that's to be expected. Fallout 3, for all the gripes I might have with it, was the result of a well-known company buying a license to create a brand new game for a franchise on the brink of existence. And not only that, they turned the franchise from a niche isometric computer game to a mainstream fully fledged 3D RPG that not only had to run well on 7th generation consoles, but also find a way to keep the look, feel, and heart of Fallout. You were never going to make everyone happy with an ambitious goal like that. But I think for what it's worth, Fallout 3 succeeded in a lot of ways. It's why the majority of fans say the ultimate Fallout experience would be if you combined the world design and atmosphere of 3 with the narrative depth and world building of New Vegas. So after many years of playing Fallout 3, I want to take a deeper look and see why it's so heavily scrutinized, how it forever changed the Fallout franchise, and above all, showcase some of the magic that has kept people playing for over 16 years now.
Come on, you piece of junk. Every day it's the same damn thing.
If there was one word to summarize the best part of Fallout 3, it would have to be atmosphere.
Security lockdown in effect. Hostile target acquired. Maximum pump! Have a nice day.
Sorry about that. It would have to be atmosphere. This is a pretty subjective and nebulous game design term that gets thrown around a lot, but it's simply the emotional response players have when interacting with the game world. I say this term is nebulous because you can't just look at a game and quantify a single thing that solely creates the atmosphere. You can't just look at 3 and go, bam, it's all the green. The green piss filter is what makes the game so atmospheric. Because you could apply the same green to New Vegas, which I did, and it's a completely different experience. This is just wrong. I feel like I'm gonna get a felony just looking at it. Great atmospheres and multitude of design choices like lighting, music, sound, and animations that all come together to create a cohesive experience that's greater than the sum of its parts. When done right, players shouldn't think twice about the world they're in. You're just absorbing and enjoying it for what it is, and Fallout 3 nailed this aspect extremely well. There's an immediate sense of wonder and exploration. This world is broken, alien, and yet strangely inviting. If you played Bethesda's older games, this type of feeling is exactly what they're known for. They just can't help themselves from crafting these mystical moments that make you feel like you're embarking on a grand adventure. And in Fallout 3, this feeling is reinforced right as you step out of the vault. Immediately, you level up, and your ears are treated to a triumphant tune. This is a pretty deliberate change made in 3 because in the original Fallouts, leveling up was not like this at all. All you heard was a little ding, and the game kinda just pats you on the back with a small line of text. Like, congrats man, you live to die another day. 3's level up screen is a drastic departure from this, and through its music alone, it's as if the game is saying, without outright saying it, you're going to be the hero of this world. But what's fascinating is how quickly that initial sense of heroism fades into isolation and mystery. If you ignore the main questline, which you probably should, and just wander aimlessly through the capital Wasteland, it becomes a pretty surreal and lonely experience. You wouldn't think that at first, given there's roughly 163 locations to explore, but if you were to map out every NPC you can actually talk to, it's kinda depressing. You'll notice that places like Megaton, Tenpenny, Paradise Falls, Rivet City, and the Citadel have a large density of NPCs, given they are major settlements. But if you remove those, there's hardly anyone out in the Wasteland. Wait a minute, the entire northernmost section of the map is really just Eden, the Tree Lovers and Oasis, and the Republic of Dave if you consider them a sovereign nation. No wonder it's so lonely up there. But as you can see, a large portion of 3's map is barren, empty, and eerily devoid of human life. You could walk in a straight line for minutes without encountering another living soul, and that's by design. The best example of this is in the northwest corner of the map. If you've explored it, you might have noticed there's not much there. I get this is a wasteland and all, but it's almost to the point where it feels like this was an afterthought. Like the devs just added it last minute, and well, That's because it was. We know this because in a pretty insightful TechRadar article about Fallout 3's world design, lead level designer Joel Burgess revealed that just 6 months before the game's launch, there was a fundamental issue with Fallout 3's map. According to Burgess, the team felt like the world was too small and players were discovering things too fast. So their solution? Just add 20% more land, there. Yeah, that'll work. While this did work in making the map feel bigger, it was a little rushed. You can tell because not only is this area pretty much empty, but they forgot to fill out an entire satellite array. I'm not joking, it's in the final version of the game. If you've ever explored out here and noticed how you can open an empty door that just says fuck you, that's because the level designers forgot to add an interior. It's why it feels so out of place. Now, that might seem silly, and it is, but I don't bring this up to shit on Bethesda. These things happen all the time in game development. But it's fascinating to see how these last-minute changes help create an atmosphere that players ended up really liking. The emptiness of the Wasteland creates a sense of loneliness that makes the few rare places like Oasis, the Republic of Dave, and Girdershade so memorable. But it also shows that when you do stumble across these insular communities, they hammer home just how isolated and broken this world is. So broken that even when you find a community that is seemingly normal, you probably didn't.
Oh my! It's like a tidal wave of flavor washing all over your body.
Your head spins, but everything is clear at the same time. It's quite a rush.
My favorite example of this is how in the southernmost section of the map, you'll stumble across some crashed out homes that are pretty much identical to the ones you've seen copy and pasted all over. But wait, these ones actually have people living in them. People that are way too friendly and patriotic in a post-apocalypse.
Yes, sir, it's every American's civic duty to cast his vote for his favorite Republican candidate. Am I right? We didn't vote for any beatnik liberal commies, that's for sure.
As you talk to the residents, you learn this place is called Andale, and they've given themselves the self-proclaimed title of
Best town in the USA contest.
This place is so weird, even the kids are realizing their family tree is more like a Christmas wreath.
My dad says I'm gonna have to marry smelly old Jenny Wilson someday. He keeps saying stuff to my mom about keeping the family going and how when him and Mr. Wilson were brothers, they didn't want to get married. It's weird. That means Mr. Wilson is my uncle and Jenny is something. I don't know. It seems weird to marry her.
And the only normal guy in town is explicitly telling you to leave.
Run, stranger! Run!
That good old Fallout 3 voice acting is insane.
However, if you ignore his warnings and dig deeper into the community, you learn they're actually a cult of cannibals that feast on unsuspecting travelers to, quote-unquote, take care of their families.
It's always, oh, how can you do this? Or, you're such terrible people, or please not me, I have a kid in Rivet City. Well, I have kids too.
I'll never forget leaving the shack and getting jumped by the entire town with guns pointed at me when I found out about their sick little secret. Andale, despite being a blimp on the massive map, was an oddly tense and unexpected experience that eventually became a core memory for me in Fallout 3. And I'm probably not the only one that shares that sentiment. The more I think about it, it's kinda insane that this wasn't even a quest or something. It's just an experience that happens in the game. But 3's atmosphere isn't just the emptiness of the world, it's everything else layered on top too. Like, you can't talk about 3 without mentioning Enon Zur, the game's composer. Even if you haven't heard of him, you've definitely heard his work. Each piece of 3's music is haunting, yet filled with sombering strings and soft echoing notes that make the world feel alive even when there's no one around. You know you're just oozing with talent when you can create something that loops in the background over and over again, but somehow it never gets old. That's some wizard shit right there. But there's something else that's just as important for 3's atmosphere that I don't see a lot of people talk about, and that's art design. If you look at Fallout 3 and New Vegas, they aren't the prettiest games, even for their time. Like, the same year, Dead Space, GTA 4, and Gears of War 2 came out. 2008 was actually a really great year. Minus the financial crisis and all. But there's something about the janky animations, low-res textures, and repetitive character models that's really endearing. Like, there's a distinct look about these games that make them stand out. Something gritty, almost crunchy about the way these worlds were built. And I might be lashing across for saying this, but I actually prefer the way these games look compared to Fallout 4. even though that game objectively has better graphics. I think it's because these games have a kind of art direction where you can't always pinpoint why it works, but you feel it in every corner of the game. And a lot of that is thanks to Adam Adamowicz, which I do apologize if I'm saying that wrong. I mean, this is what he said.
Hi, my name is Adam Adamowicz, and I'm the concept artist at Bethesda Softworks.
Which, what a legendary name, by the way. This guy was 3's main concept artist. Most people don't realize how important this guy was in creating not only the atmosphere of 3, but also Skyrim and Oblivion's Shivering Isle DLC. If you love the way any of those games look and feel, a huge part of that is because of Adam. He didn't just design the world, he truly gave it life. If you ever get a chance to look through his concept art portfolio, it's downright beautiful. Almost everything, and I do mean everything, you end up seeing in the final game started off as a piece of concept art that he personally drew by hand. Even the smallest details like the Pawowski shelters, Vault-Tec propaganda, and even down to all the clothes the Wastelanders wear was all part of Adam's vision. He had this amazing ability to make Fallout 3's world feel cohesive to the point where if I were to show you a box of Blamco mac and cheese or a laser rifle, you could distinctly point it out as Fallout. Which, side note, I think a large part of why Fallout 4 looks so different from 3 artistically is because Adam didn't get a chance to work on the project as originally intended. If you've noticed I've been referring to him in past tense, it's because Adam's no longer with us. He actually passed away in 2012 after losing his battle with lung cancer. Look, I know these videos can be goofy and all, and sometimes I do poke fun at 3, but this guy genuinely gave his all, busting his ass every day to create almost all the assets in this game, and a large chunk of these assets were reused to eventually create New Vegas. I really wanted to shine some light on this guy because without Adam, Fallout 3 New Vegas wouldn't have the same visual charm we've come to fall in love with. In a sense, it's extremely heartfelt and endearing to know that his work and contributions will live on forever through these games. Regardless of how you feel about Fallout 3, that's pretty cool, and I can't help but respect that. Now, I could keep going on and on about all the things that create the atmosphere of 3. Like, don't even get me started on lighting, because man, almost every place in this game has some extremely beautiful lighting. But it doesn't matter how great your game's atmosphere is if the world design doesn't match the intended experience. And 3's world design is, interesting, to say the least.
I say I'll care forever.
When I was trying to figure out why some people consider 3 their favorite out of the series, 2 recurring reasons kept popping up. Either A, they think it's one of the most atmospheric Fallouts, which, as previously discussed, checks out. Or B, which I find far more interesting, they say 3 feels far more like a Wasteland than New Vegas or even 4 ever did. And you know what? I have to agree. But why is that? With a game called Fallout, you'd expect the world to look pretty destroyed. I mean, we're talking about the aftermath of warheads capable of leveling LA 20 times over, getting money shot at all over the US. That's gonna cause a lot of damage. And Fallout 3 perfectly represents this. The entire game looks like it's been blasted apart, rebuilt with duct tape, and then blown apart again just for good measure. It's so over the top in its destruction that you could argue there's no chance society could ever rebuild here, hence why it still looks like Detroit, Michigan 200 years later. Now, compare that to New Vegas. Even if you ignore that Mr. House stopped the majority of nukes from hitting the Mojave, the areas that did get hit show very little lasting damage. Sure, you've got a radioactive shack here, a radioactive crater there, but for the most part, the Mojave feels less like a wasteland and more like a society going through late-stage capitalism. These stark differences exist because the world design and world building between 3 and New Vegas are fundamentally different, because one is a post-apocalyptic game, while the other is a post-post-apocalyptic game. Fallout 3 feels more like a wasteland because the devs opted for a post-apocalyptic setting. This means a world that takes place in the immediate aftermath of a catastrophic event, which in our case is a nuclear war. Survival is also harsh within a lawless environment where there's a scarcity of resources, and the inhabitants within them are exploring the depths of their morality when societal rules no longer apply. Fallout 3 checks all of these boxes. Kind of. And this is because Bethesda's Fallout envisions a world where humanity didn't progress after the war. It actually regressed. Emil Pagulero, or Pagulero, however you say it, one of Fallout 3's lead designers and writers, admits this outright in the making of Fallout 3 documentary.
So in our game, things have actually gotten worse. You know, society hasn't progressed. You know, humanity is struggling to survive. There's radiation sickness and people don't have fresh, clean water, and like, people are pretty well screwed.
This philosophy is baked into every corner of the game. It's why Megaton looks like a slapped together shantytown, why Rivet City is literally a rusting aircraft carrier that's barely holding itself together, and why outside of a few insular communities, most of the wasteland is a crumbling, rubble-filled mess. The capital wasteland isn't just post-apocalyptic, it's straight up stagnant. People are surviving, sure, but no one's thriving, and that's by Bethesda's design. Contrast this with Obsidian's New Vegas. Their take on Fallout leans more into a post-apocalyptic world, a timeline where humanity has moved past the immediate aftermath of the bombs and is now trying to rebuild. Settlements like Good Springs, Prim, and Jacobstown exist because people have rebuilt their lives, established agriculture, and even set up trade routes. The world's even stable enough that humans feel confident to grasp for power again, as evidenced by the NCR, Caesar's Legion, and Mr. House, all vying for control of the Mojave. This is a far more nuanced and complex thing to tackle, and it's something at a surface level that doesn't seem fun at first, but ends up being extremely engaging. With that said, these games are trying to create two completely different kinds of worlds. Fallout 3 wants you to feel like you're walking through a dead world, a world that's stuck in time, a genuine wasteland, if you will. And I gotta say, choosing Washington DC as the setting for Fallout 3 was a really good choice. So good in fact that I was surprised they almost didn't stick with it. According to Todd Howard, they originally thought about continuing the story on the West Coast like the first two Fallouts, but Emil was pretty dead set on it being in DC.
I was thinking of setting it on the West Coast. Emil really pushed, we should do it out here. I was like, I don't know if that has the right Fallout feel, you know. But the more we thought about it, it was, oh yeah, we got to. Who can blow up Washington, D.C. better than us?
And for once, I can agree with Emil, because I really can't imagine a Bethesda made Fallout 3 that didn't take place in Washington, D.C. Because it's not just any city, it's the nation's capital, the symbolic heart of America. There's something surreal about exploring the ruins of DC and seeing how this once powerful empire has been reduced to ashes. I think the setting of Fallout 3 really grew on me when I was wandering around the DC metro, lost as usual, and found myself at this random intersection. There's an hotel, a metro station, and some Brotherhood dudes just standing around like they're guarding something important. Then I see this big fence. You can't go past it, but you can see behind it. It's a massive glowing crater. I assumed you couldn't go there because it just looks like another out of bounds area, but as I was about to leave, I spot this random manhole cover. I hop in expecting another dead end metro tunnel, but instead I climb out on the other side and my Pip-Boy just reads, "You discovered the White House." The place that once housed the most powerful men and women in the world isn't just abandoned or in ruins, it's completely gone. Wiped off the map like it never existed. That's some powerful imagery. And yet, I can't help but laugh because the only reason I even felt that experience was because someone at Bethesda didn't have time to finish the White House. Yeah, it wasn't just the satellite arrays that were missing an interior. The entire White House is basically cut content. I'm not even joking, they admit this outright on a video.
While working on DC, we realized that we had not done the White House yet, and we didn't really have room on the schedule to do the White House. We had done a lot of the other landmarks and did ruins of them scattered throughout the city, but that was kind of a major one. And we were kind of running out of time. Like, well, what do we do? It's like, just put a crater. The White House would have been the first thing they took off. So let's just wipe it. It doesn't exist here.
I'm not even mad or even calling Bethesda lazy when I point these things out. That's not how I feel. I'm just simply amazed at how much of this game's charm comes from the developers working within the constraints they had. Like, yeah, I would have preferred to explore a post-apocalyptic Oval Office that leads into a secret nuclear bunker, but a giant crater got a response out of me too, so, when Todd Howard says it just works, I believe him because somehow, some way, it just does. I swear this game is just a series of happy little accidents that just work well enough to create a fun experience.
Oh!
Bro.
All of this just works.
And that's just one of the many locations within DC. There's honestly so much hidden stuff tucked away in the greater DC metro that I could spend an entire video talking about it. But I'm not going to because these videos are long enough as is.
Glad that's over.
But as much as the DC Metro nails the vibe of a shattered civilization, that's just the bottom right corner of 3's map. The rest of the Capital Wasteland might not have the density of DC, but it's no less impressive. Bethesda went all in on making exploration the core of the experience, and its world design shows. On top of this, no matter where you are in the Wasteland, there's always something in the distance to catch your eye. If you can see it, you can probably explore it.
You're gonna have a big, open-ended world. You're gonna be able to walk anywhere you want. If you see something in the distance, you're gonna be able to walk to it, and you're gonna be able to open it up, and you're gonna find lots of cool stuff there.
This idea of world design shows itself as soon as you begin the game. The moment right after you step out of Vault 101, you reach that cliff, and boom, the whole wasteland opens up before you. And what's really cool is that the developers are showing you a lot here, even if it doesn't look that way because 3's textures just refuse to load. That's not Megaton, that's a cute astigmatism. But on the horizon, you can spot Megaton, Springvale's rocket, the Capitol building, and even the Washington Monument. That's 4 visually unique points of interest that players can see right from the beginning. So all things considered, if 3 subjectively has one of the best atmospheres of the Fallout games, and the world design is top-notch with a fairly seamless loop of exploration, why is this game so scrutinized and viewed to be inferior to New Vegas by the community? Everything I've told you so far makes the game look and sound like everything you could ask for out of a Fallout game. But you see, as brilliant as Fallout 3's map is, it's not perfect. While Bethesda is wickedly talented at world design, their world building leaves a lot to be desired.
Damn! Oh!
Something I noticed in the making of Fallout 3 documentary is how Bethesda didn't want to take the world too seriously. It's a pretty important point, so much so it's actually brought up 3 separate times in this interview.
That's what I love about Fallout. It doesn't take itself too seriously because the reality is so frightening and so depressing. And that in itself is gold for someone like me to come in and try to, help create that world. So it's pure escapist entertainment. It's crazy, and you try not to get wrapped up on the seriousness of it. Their body parts are blowing up, and it's just a big joke. You know what I mean? It's pure escapist entertainment. It's crazy, and you try not to get wrapped up on the seriousness of it.
They really wanted to make sure you heard this line, but why stress this point across so much? I think it's because while the magic of 3 comes from its atmosphere and visually interesting world, there aren't that many compelling reasons as to why you're exploring this world. There's a lot to do and see in 3, but a lot of these experiences are very surface level. Vault 108, located at the easternmost section of the map, is a vault whose entire gimmick is having a bunch of clones named Gary yelling his name at you. That's it. There aren't even working terminals in this vault. The most amount of depth you're getting out of this place is 1 holotape, and if you're really desperate, a terminal entry in the Citadel. And if you think about it a little harder, why have the Gary clones stayed alive here for God knows how many years? How are they surviving without food or clean water? The Gary Vault is absurd and silly, but as Emil would say,
it's pure escapist entertainment. It's crazy.
This isn't to say that you can't have silly things. Fallout 2 and New Vegas have plenty of that, even more so if you include Wild Wasteland, an optional trait that purposely adds goofy encounters to your game. But when New Vegas does something silly like the Kings, a gang of Elvis-worshipping goons that run Freeside, and definitely do not touch their jukebox. The whole Elvis bit is a small part of their reasoning for being in the world. They don't fully understand who Elvis was or what he stood for, but that doesn't matter. To them, he's a symbol of a bygone era, one of freedom, individuality, and charisma. This idea under the Elvis persona is what allows them to rally together as the Kings. But even if you strip away the fact they're Elvis impersonators, they still represent a gang trying to carve out a piece of stability in a lawless society. And their interactions with the broader factions like the NCR, the Followers of the Apocalypse, Mr. House, and even the player reveal a lot of nuance and ambiguity. For a faction that's pretty goofy looking, they're oddly deep and reveal a lot about the socio-economic conditions of Freeside. That right there is great world building. It allows for something goofy on the surface, but ends up being really well written and fleshed out. I can't say the same thing for the vault full of Garys. Strip away the Gary clones and it's just another set of metal corridors with things to shoot at. Just a bizarre and quirky shooting gallery of Garys, I guess. But really, this entire game feels like one giant shooting gallery at times, which is funny because Bethesda also said this in the documentary.
Our game is primarily first person, so when you have guns in first person, the bar has been raised. You've got Halo 3, Call of Duty 4, you get to approach that level, but it's tough because we're an RPG, not a shooter.
I have a hard time believing that when it feels like shooting took priority over being a fleshed out RPG. Minefield, a location that's literally a minefield, is intriguing because who would be paranoid enough to cover an entire town with 67 mines? And yes, I counted each of them. Apparently the state of Arkansas would, but that's pretty much the end of the appeal. You go to town, dodge mines, and shoot an old man in the face. That's all. The only way you can get more depth out of the situation is if you buy the official guidebook, and there's one snippet of information on page 290 that infers that Arkansas only shot you because he thought you were a slaver, which is frankly dumb. This kind of information should be in-game or told through NPCs. If you have to use an official game guide to retroactively justify your characters being in the world, that's not great world building. And I feel confident in saying that because New Vegas does something very similar to Minefield, but it's executed way better. In the top northeast section of the map, you can stumble across an area that's been shelled heavily by artillery. It's so bad that it's assumed that no one could ever dodge the bombs until you do. Upon doing so, you discover an entire reclusive community of explosive fetishes called the Boomers. This isn't just dodging explosives and shooting a mentally unwell man like 3. I mean, well, you could blow Pearl's head off.
Sorry.
You actually learn why they adopted such a hardcore insular society, and depending on your personal actions, not what the game forces you to do, you can wipe them all out or help them change their outlook on the greater society within the Mojave. This is what people mean when they complain about Fallout 3 lacking in meaningful world building. You can have really cool locations like Minefield, but make these things connect into the greater game world, or at the very least, allow people to choose how they deal with the situation, how they see fit. If we're to believe that Arkansas shot us because he thought we were slavers, wouldn't it be far more interesting if you were able to sneak past his defenses and, have a conversation with him? That'll allow you to learn more about Paradise Falls and maybe join forces with him to get revenge. You could even do something like, if you fail to sneak past him, then it makes more sense for the shoot first, ask questions later mentality he has. This would not only add a layer of depth, but also reward characters who opted to build around stealth and make sense in this harsh world. But no, the only way you can even talk to Arkansas is by enslaving him, then freeing him, and then suddenly he's a chill guy. That's just dumb writing.
What are you looking at?
This is hopeless.
There are so many cool things in 3 that could have been even cooler if Bethesda took more time to flesh them out. I'm not even saying everything has to be meticulously thought out, but these small little tweaks to the writing would make for a far more engaging and memorable experience with the characters of 3. Now, you could sit here all day and conjure up all these would've, could've, should'ves, but really my biggest concern with the world building in 3 is that Bethesda doesn't seem to see Fallout as a world, they see it more as an aesthetic. It's the only way I can justify that super mutants are so prevalent even though the Master in Fallout 1 died, why the Enclave are the main bad guys of 3 even though they were blown up at the end of Fallout 2, and why bottle caps are still being used even though they were sunsetted in the last game. I know these things have in-game justifications such as Vault 87, the Enclave and Brotherhood having bases all around the US, and caps being a finite resource backed by water reserves. But while you can justify these things, it makes for a really boring interpretation of Fallout. It means the world is really the same no matter where you go. The bombed out buildings, the retrofuturistic tech, the derelict vaults, it's all there to create a mood, not tell a cohesive story. The problem with this approach is that it sacrifices depth for spectacle. Fallout 3 is visually striking, sure, but it lacks the thematic weight and interconnected storytelling that made the earlier games so memorable. The result is a world that feels more like a theme park than a living, breathing place. You're not exploring the remnants of a society trying to rebuild itself, you're wandering through a series of attractions designed to look cool, but rarely make you think. It's a wasteland where nothing really changes, nothing really matters, and the only thing left to do is shoot your way from one spectacle to the next. And maybe that's the point. Fallout 3 in many ways is a game about escapism. I mean, Emil told us that 3 times, It's a chance to wander through a beautifully crafted ruin, to fight super mutants and robots, and to feel like a hero in the broken world. But for a series that once prided itself on exploring deeper themes of morality, survival, and progress, it's hard not to see Fallout 3 as a step back. It's fun, sure, but it's also safe, predictable, and shallow at times. Thankfully, this isn't all of Fallout 3. If it was, I wouldn't even be making this video. Because while Bethesda's world building might not shine as bright, they compensate for it with some really memorable quests and experiences.
Is that so? Even if I call you a milk-sucking, mutant-loving, water-stealing whore?
Well, yes.
Things may look very dark.
Something really cool about 3 is how you can ask any person who's played this game what their experience was like, and you're bound to get some wildly different answers. This is because, just like the originals, Fallout 3 put a strong emphasis on random encounters. If you've never played the first 2 Fallouts, one of the most butt-clenching experiences you can have is traveling from one cell of the map to another. Visually, this is pretty boring, it's just a line being drawn on the map, but the excitement comes from the fact that in this process, anything, and I do mean anything, can happen to the player. Whether you're getting spit roasted by a pack of deathclaws or stumbling on a lost episode of Doctor Who, there's a palpable sense of uneasiness not really knowing what's around the corner. And the spirit of these random and unpredictable encounters have been sprinkled all over Fallout 3. There's actually more than 80 random encounters that can happen to the player, with some being things you've seen dozens of times, such as the Brotherhood Outcast members, Talon Company mercs, and wandering traders like Crow, Doc Hoff, and Crazy Wolfgang.
Welcome, sir or madam, to Crazy Wolfgang's traveling junk store, the depot of detritus, the shop of slop, and the caravan of crap.
Which, fun fact, you can actually upgrade these traders at Canterbury Commons, assuming your guy didn't die like mine did.
Does that belong to you?
Yes.
But they'll progressively sell better and unique equipment the more money you invest into them. Do it enough times and they'll even reward you for being their generous benefactor. But some of these encounters are so rare and obscure, there's a good chance you've never seen them. Like the time I found a pack of raiders beating the hell out of one of their members like some gang initiation, a super mutant named Leo, who's actually a really chill guy, and even the time I stumbled across the one and only Roach King atop his junk throne. It's kinda wasted potential that a character with such an imposing name has no unique dialogue or related quests. But all of this gets even crazier when you realize a random encounter can also interact with NPCs in the game world. This results in a level of chaos that you just won't find in the other Fallouts. Like, here's a time I found a group of hitmen and raiders fighting each other, but while I was trying to snipe one of them in VATS, my dumbass didn't realize someone shot the car right in front of me.
If I have to hold up the sky.
Bro, I actually got jump scared right there. Or when I was leaving a metro station and one raider decided to blow up his friend for no reason at all. Like, bro, what are you doing? And this one, I was just enamored by everything that was going on. You have a soul raider trying to fight two super mutants across a river, and then when they eventually died, I turned around to find a random ass Deathclaw fighting a Brotherhood outcast member?
Did you see that shit?
Yes. And even a dude with a slave collar came out of nowhere begging me to free him. At this point, I'm just a spectator of anarchy. These are only a few moments I was able to capture randomly, but Fallout 3 is a never-ending experience of wild things happening in the Wasteland. But while this is one of Fallout 3's greatest strengths, it's simultaneously one of its weaknesses. Because Bethesda really liked this idea of having a truly random playthrough, it truly is random. One of the best encounters in the entire game involves a supersonic boom that can happen anywhere on the map at any time at random. Yeah, that explosion was actually a UFO crashing, and it contains a unique alien blaster called the Fire Lance, which is one of, if not the strongest weapon in the game. Literally sneeze on anyone with this weapon and they'll be turned into dust. Which, this is cool and all, but you could play the game for hundreds of hours and never get this weapon, because RNGesus just didn't bless your playthrough. Fallout 3 doesn't have any form of bad luck protection, meaning the game decides at random if you're going to be able to see all the cool things developers programmed. That's why some people play 3 and have tons of crazy coincidences, while others are stuck seeing the same Brotherhood outcasts and roaming traders for the 20th time. This becomes a little problematic when you realize some random encounters are directly tied to quests, meaning you can beat a quest and never really see the reactivity of it fully play out. Depending on which members survive during the Riley Ranger's quests, you can find one of the members fighting super mutants randomly in the Wasteland, typically Donovan. After completing the Superhuman Gambit questline, there's a random chance a kid will walk up to you and recognize whatever costume you chose.
Thanks, you're fantastic.
Or, here's a really neat one. Halfway through the main questline, the Enclave are introduced as the big bad of the game, and they start slowly taking over the capital Wasteland. This includes them trying to overtake Vault 101, the same vault you grew up in at the beginning of the game. Eventually, you have to make your way back to Vault 101 and solve some home life issues, but depending on how you do that, it results in one of two random encounters. If you opened up the vault, your childhood crush Amata ends up getting captured by the Enclave, and if you don't intervene, she gets murdered in cold blood. But if you save the vault and make Amata the new overseer, the ending of Fallout 1 reenacts, but at least you get some of your peers strolling around Wasteland, such as Susie Mack.
As much as we owe you, there are still a lot of people who blame you for all the deaths. It's not fair, I know, but it's the way it is. I know Amata still misses you.
These are two really cool outcomes that are determined based on how you personally concluded a quest, and it makes the open world feel reactive to your choices. It's just a shame that it's completely random, and encounters like these are extremely rare. The majority of the 80 random encounters I mentioned earlier are purely combat focused. Like, you can blow up Megaton with an atomic bomb, and there are consequences to your actions, but it's just a couple of ex-Megaton settlers who don't say anything and just attack you on sight. At random, mind you. I hardly feel like this decision to nuke an entire town matters when my own dad just scoffs at me if I do it, and I get a few upset refugees trying to stab me with fence spears. Look, had way more encounters been less like this and more like these, I think 3 would have been just as adored as New Vegas in terms of reactivity and player choice. You still can't kill anyone as you see fit like you can in New Vegas, but it would have helped immensely. Overall, I like the randomness of 3, but I think they went a little too overboard when you have some of the coolest things in your game potentially just never happening for players. At its best, the randomness brings a sense of discovery and wonder that's hard to replicate. It's why you can find people who have thousands of hours in this game but are still learning new things or seeing new interactions because, well, they're not scouring the Fallout 3 wiki or buying overpriced video game guides from the late 2000s. But at its worst, it means some players are getting a subpar experience because the game just didn't allow you to see all the cool things the devs made. I think this is an issue that could have been avoided if they just added some form of bad luck protection or just made encounters guaranteed to happen if the player does something. But random encounters are only one part of what makes every player's journey uniquely theirs. The other part of the equation is all the attention to detail that not every player will pick up on. At the beginning of the game, most players will probably head directly to Megaton, as the world design is grooming you to go there. As soon as you enter Megaton, you'll probably hear Lucas Sims say this.
Well, I'll be damned. You're from that vault, Vault 101. I ain't seen one of those jumpsuits in a long time.
But he only says this because you're wearing a vault suit. Take it off and his greeting is completely different.
I'll be damned. Another newcomer.
And once he finally talks to you, the manner in which he greets you is all dependent on your karma as well. If you're evil, he thinks you're shady. And if you're good, he thinks you're an alright guy or gal.
I don't know why, but I like you, girl. Something tells me you're alright. So welcome to Megaton. Just holla if you need something.
Also, if you kill Moriarty, his ghoul slave Gob basically takes over the bar, and even the sign outside changes to Gob's bar. This kind of attention to detail is sprinkled all over Fallout 3, but it's very subtle and sometimes so niche that it's not going to happen for like 95% of players. Like, here's an odd one. Moira, a pretty eclectic citizen of Megaton, offers you the job of a lifetime working on a project called the Wasteland Survival Guide. Towards the end of the book, she wants you to study about robots by sending you to a Robco factory. However, if you have the Mechanist's costume from that Superhuman Gambit questline, she actually has a unique dialogue acknowledging that.
Oh, this is so exciting! I feel like I'm sending you out on some sort of super assignment. Okay, give me a moment to calm down.
This doesn't really change the questline or drastically alter anything, but the fact that someone thought about this rare scenario and then programmed it in tells me that a level of thought and care went into this game. It's just oddly placed at times. I just wish this energy was placed into, I don't know, the main story or companions.
Sounds like we're gonna have some fun times, lover.
Okay, companions have become a pretty integral part of the Fallout experience, so much so that I'm sure we've all seen the clip of the cursed Codsworth or thousands of posts simping for the beloved individuals like Veronica, Raoul, and Nick Valentine. Man, these companions are so loved and adored that entire YouTube channels were built off just showcasing all the hidden interactions and possible scenarios. 4 million views, by the way. So it might be a little surprising to hear that companions kinda sucked until New Vegas and Fallout 4 finally fleshed them out. In the original Fallouts, you could have companions, but really they were just meat shields with a vague sense of personality. To the point where it almost felt like an after... Okay, alright, I already used that joke. Yes, it was an afterthought.
Followers were not in the original spec for the game, and we had no time to code it when the idea came up. And we never fixed that because it wasn't done in code. We literally didn't have the time to do it. So that's why the AI is what it is, and I'm kind of embarrassed about that.
This actually explains a lot, and why you never give Ian a submachine gun or Marcus a Gatling laser. Compared to the originals, 3 is a major upgrade, but I can't really say they're great. Sure, there's a fairly wide range of diverse characters, each with their own personalities and temperaments, but besides the initial greeting, that's all you're really getting out of them. There are some really cool premises here for companions, like a Brotherhood Paladin who personally looked after you when you were a baby, an extremely intelligent and philosophical super mutant, and even your childhood bully depending on how you played out the main questline. But I think the biggest example of wasted potential is Sharon. Located in the Underworld, an underground safe haven dedicated to ghouls, you can find him in this bar, where at first, he just looks like a really stern bodyguard who doesn't say much.
No, go talk to Azrakal. Talk to Azrakal.
But you learn he's only here because he has a literal slave contract that he physically cannot break. A concept that should be dripping with moral and psychological complexity. Like, that's a really interesting premise. He's a ghoul and an absolute beefcake of one too. So how does someone like this end up in slavery and for how long? But after you buy his freedom or just murder his old boss because why not?
Yes.
He becomes a little more than a silent shotgun with legs. No inner conflict, no personal growth, just...
I'm glad that's over.
Compare this to New Vegas, and the difference is staggering. In many ways, Obsidian didn't just solve the companion problem of earlier Fallout games, they completely redefined what it meant to have a companion in these games. Companions don't just follow you around, they live in the world. They react to its events, its factions, and most importantly, to you.
Whoa! Check your fire! Grandma's so proud of her little pumpkin, assassinating the president like that.
Grandma, that's pretty based. Take Raoul, for example. This guy's a walking history book oozing with enough sarcasm to kill a baby elephant. He's a ghoul who's seen everything: pre-war America, pre-war Mexico, the rise and fall of societies, and the ugliest sides of humanity. But what I really like about New Vegas is how it doesn't just throw all of that at you in one info dump. You have to work for it. Spend enough time with Raul and you'll start to see the cracks in his grumpy mechanic facade. The dude's got layers, centuries of loss, a fading sense of self-worth, and this lingering question of, does he even matter in a world that's left him behind?
That loyal guy. He's getting up there in years, but he still finds a way to make himself useful to his people. If you ask me, that's better than withering away all alone or holding on to some faded piece of glory from your past.
Raul's story is filled with tragedy, and it's not the kind of trauma you can shake off with a few stiff drinks. Centuries later, he's still choked up about the loss of his family, and more specifically, his sister Rafaela.
She went out to find some food one day. I was sick, so I stayed at our camp. I guess it must have been the beginning of radiation poisoning. Anyway, it was supposed to be safe, but some raiders happened to pass through where she was scavenging. I won't speak of what they did to her. When I found her body, the only way to recognize her was this funny little scar on her knee from when she was a little girl.
That's insanely dark and a direct consequence of his actions as a vigilante gunslinger. Raul's past is haunted by this failure, and you can feel the weight of it every time he talks about her.
Terrible doesn't begin to cover it, boss. I led my whole family down. First the ranch, now Rafaela. I was the last Tejada.
Damn, that's sad, man. Now, New Vegas could have stopped there and you would have already made better companions in the previous games, but no, they took it a step further, because on top of really fleshing out each individual companion, there's also hidden quest lines and direct reactivity tied to each one. See, Raul doesn't just open up to you, he also asks for advice on how he should process his trauma and move forward with his life, because well, therapy is kind of hard to find in the Wasteland. This results in you either encouraging him to embrace his gunslinging past, or convince him that he deserves a quieter life as a mechanic. Either one tangibly changes his appearance, skill sets, and outlook on life. It's a powerful exploration of identity and purpose, and your choices carry real weight, because by the end of it, Raul doesn't just feel like a companion, he feels like someone who's genuinely grown because of your influence. And that's just one of the many companions, each with their own complex and branching storylines. Even EDE, or Eddie, a literal Enclave iBot, something you see dozens of times in 3, gets an extremely heartfelt questline that even spills over into one of the DLCs. But what really sold me that Fallout Companions could be something special is when you realize New Vegas Companions really do pay attention to what you say and do. They're actively watching you, forming opinions, and responding to your actions in ways that make them feel undeniably real.
Everything to the Strip and McCarran, are you kidding? I guess I should be grateful you didn't activate the laser. You activated Archimedes? What the hell are you thinking?
Take Boone, for example. His hatred for the Legion isn't just a fun character detail, it's a core part of who he is. The man is living with the crushing guilt of killing his wife Carla to spare her from the horrors of slavery, all because she was betrayed and sold to the Legion while pregnant. That's a wound so deep it's never going to heal, and it shapes every interaction you have with him. So when you bring Boone to Cottonwood Cove, a Legion stronghold, you're not just bringing him to a place on the map, you're dragging him to the heart of his trauma, and he reacts.
We're near a Legion slave camp now. I've been here before. Let's get one thing straight. I see any crimson, I'm taking the shot. You don't like that, you're on your own.
So when you realize that all of this was possible in the same exact engine as 3, 3's companions by contrast are static. They don't question your choices, challenge your judgment, or seem particularly invested in the main quest. It took a whole ass DLC for that one to be fixed. 3's companions are there, but they're not present. At the heart of this comparison is a simple truth. Companions matter because relationships matter. Fallout 3 treats companions like optional gameplay features, while New Vegas treats them like, I don't know, people? And just like in real life, the effort you put into those relationships have tangible rewards. Fallout 3 showed the potential of companions in a fully 3D open world setting, but New Vegas turned that potential into something extraordinary. The game doesn't just let you have companions, it lets you eat them too. I mean, care for them too. And in doing so, it's created some of the most heartfelt and memorable moments I've experienced in the Fallout series to date. Now, alright, there's something I've been avoiding this entire video, and well, you can't make a Fallout 3 video without talking about it. And that's the main story.
Oh, bro. I'm in charge here. I am the
I know I just spent however many chapters gushing about 3's atmosphere, world design, and chaotic randomness, but you can't talk about this game without at least touching on the elephant-sized plot hole in the room known as the main quest line. There's a reason why most people say you should ignore the main quests in Bethesda games and just enjoy the side quests, because well, they're not the greatest. But that doesn't mean it's complete garbage. It's actually quite impressive from a technical perspective, and it does quite a few things right. For one, the structure of the main story ensures you visit key locations like Megaton, Rivet City, and the Citadel, giving players a broad overview of the Wasteland, but also plenty of opportunities for side exploration as you navigate to and from these key areas. On top of this, there's some pretty memorable moments. Tranquility Lane is one of, if not the best experience in the main quest. This occurs when you discover a hidden vault on the search for your dad. You eventually discover he's stuck in a bizarre, idyllic 1950s suburban simulation where a little girl, who's actually one of the head scientists of Vault Tech, trapped all the residents in a never-ending torture loop for 200 years straight. This nightmare-fueled scenario, mixed with the sadistic choices Dr. Braun forces upon the player, brilliantly showcases the darker side of Vault Tech's experiments. Like, this is way better than that damn Gary Vault. It's a rare moment where atmosphere, player choice, and storytelling blend seamlessly. Another highlight is the reveal of Liberty Prime, a towering patriotic war machine spouting anti-communist rhetoric.
America will never fall to communist invasion. Scanning for Chinese artillery. Communism is a temporary setback on the road to freedom.
I know some people complain it just plays the game for you during a pretty key battle, but still, the sheer spectacle of it is hard to deny. This is the coolest robot in the Wasteland. Additionally, the crawl through Vault 87 to retrieve the Gek is a pretty atmospheric and eerie sequence. The Gek, although a recycled MacGuffin from Fallout 2, serves its purpose in driving the plot forward, and the fact that players can detonate it, if they're feeling particularly cheeky, is a really neat attention to detail. I just wish this gave some kind of secret ending or something and didn't just fade to white and kill you. These are all really great things that I can appreciate, but that's where all my positives start to run out. While there are some brilliant moments here and there, overall the story suffers from a poorly structured narrative, lack of player agency, and questionable writing that undermines its own stakes and logic. Now, here's the thing. I could spend an ungodly amount of time critiquing and going over every inconsistency and missed potential within Fallout 3's main story, but that's not worth it. I genuinely don't have it in me to waste what little time I have on this earth doing that. But I will say this. The biggest sin with Fallout 3's story is the lack of a clear and compelling antagonist. You could ignore the subpar writing, contrived plot points, and how the main story often feels like you're just picking up the sloppy seconds of your dad, then Dr. Lee, and eventually the Brotherhood of Steel. All of this could be forgiven if there was an actual good villain. Look, a lot of people love Frank Horrigan, the final boss of Fallout 2. He's so cool that I try to mention or cameo him in every Fallout video I make. But let's be real, he had as much nuance as a pile of bricks, and that's kind of the point. He was nothing like the master of Fallout 1 in terms of narrative depth, but it didn't matter because, well, President Richardson was the true villain of 2. Plus, Frank just had straight aura. Whoever wrote the line,
"You've gotten a lot farther than you should have, but then you haven't met Frank Horrigan either. Your ride's over, Muty. Time to die,"
deserves a presidential medal, because that line is just cold as fuck. The combination of Richardson and Horrigan worked so well because their roles complemented each other perfectly. Richardson embodied the cold, calculating cruelty of the Enclave's ideology, while also delivering one of the most impactful plot twists in Fallout history.
This facility, the vaults, were part of the Great Plan. The vaults were set up to test humanity. Some had not enough food synthesizers. Others had only men in them. Yet others were designed to open after only 6 months. They each had a unique set of circumstances designed to test the occupants.
Horrigan, by contrast, was the Enclave's fist, a towering, inhuman juggernaut who executed their will with terrifying efficiency. His lack of personal ideology and unwavering loyalty served as a critique of blind military obedience, while his imposing larger-than-life presence elevated the stakes of the final battle, because I don't think popping an old fart in the head would make for a compelling final boss. But I guess Fallout 3 would disagree. Together, they provided both an ideological conflict and an unforgettable showdown, making Fallout 2's villains an iconic part of the series' legacy. Now, I only bring all this up because in Fallout 3, they tried to do the same exact thing and it didn't work. They recycled the Enclave as the main villains, which is already questionable since they all got blown up at the end of the previous game, but Bethesda also tried to repeat the same dynamic duo from Fallout 2 through President Eden and Colonel Autumn, without any of the build-up, nuance, or depth that made the originals work so well. President Eden is actually stupid, so much so you can convince him to off himself within 10 seconds with some pretty circular logic.
Yes, I suppose it is. Very well. You shall have your wish.
Who the fuck wrote this? And the Colonel, although not as egregious as Eden, falls completely flat in terms of personality, pull, or believable reasons for his actions. These two villains suck, and they just kind of feel like they exist for the sake of building some kind of conflict, and they wanted an enemy that prior fans would recognize. I could keep going on and on about the Colonel's cop-out death, how your dad is equally dumb in all the choices he makes during the main story, the entirety of Little Lamplight, and how the writing was so dumb that even logical choices like sending your companions in to start the Purifier weren't viable choices unless you bought a DLC that retconned everything. Regardless, Fallout 3's main story is a textbook example of ambition undermined by poor execution. It tries to tell an epic tale of heroism and sacrifice, but stumbles over itself at every corner. Again, that's not to say Fallout 3 is a bad game overall. It just shows me that Bethesda's strengths lie in atmosphere, exploration, and the experiences players can create outside of the main story. To me, it's a reminder that while the world design and atmosphere can make a game immersive, a well-crafted story is what makes it unforgettable.
I'm in charge here. I am the Enclave.